Good morning, everybody. I'm Karen Van Ness. I'm the treasurer and an executive board member for San Diego Association of Realtors.
I'm Spencer Lugash. I'm the president of the San Diego Association of Realtors. I'm also a longtime broker and attorney.
And we're here to talk about the buyer-broker representation agreement and how you're going to get paid today.
Yep. So this is another episode of Just the Facts, and we want to talk about the different processes that you can use in order to make sure that you get paid your commission as a buyer's agent, and also how to go about expressing value to get a client to sign that buyer representation agreement.
It's Just the Facts.
Okay, so let's talk about how realtors can get paid now.
Okay.
Right? So basically, there's really three ways, right? So the first way is they get paid through being a member of the MLS. And so we know that that's still the case right now. The settlement terms still have yet to be approved. Even when they are approved, we know that it's not going to go in effect till mid-July. And so for right now, everything is the same as it's been. So you go on the MLS right now, and if you are a member of the same MLS that somebody is offering cooperating broker compensation, then you are pretty much guaranteed that payment, again, by virtue of being members of the same MLS.
Right.
Option two, you contact the listing broker directly and negotiate with them or have a discussion with them about whether they are willing to offer any cooperating compensation, willing to increase maybe the offer of compensation that they've already put in the MLS. That sometimes happens. And you work out with them directly through a contract called the Cooperating Broker Compensation Agreement, Form CBC. I know you're aware. And you would get paid still from the listing broker, listing agent, but by virtue not of being a member of the MLS necessarily, but by a written contract.
Okay.
Right? And then part three is you can get paid through a negotiation between the buyer and the seller.
Okay, the principles.
Correct. The principles of the deal through the RPA, paragraph 3G3, by the virtue of you having the buyer having a buyer broker agreement and negotiating with the seller in the RPA with the use of the SPBV form, which is the seller's payment of brokers.
Seller to pay buyer broker.
Thank you. Seller to pay buyer broker. I know the acronyms very well.
Yeah.
And use that form to negotiate that the seller would take over and in essence agree to an assignment of the buyer broker agreement that the buyer has with their buyer agent, so that they get paid within the contract at the close of escrow through the proceeds of the seller.
Okay.
So those are the three ways that you can get paid today, right?
Okay.
Now. So I know you know. So what happens if everything goes through? What would happen in mid-July? Are we getting rid of any of those?
Well, if it goes through as it's proposed, there will be no offer of compensation made in any form on the MLS sheet. In any way can it be specified in any language on the MLS.
Which is a little side note, a little sidebar, but it's important for us to remind everybody about that, because we have gotten that question many times, and people kind of going, well, what if I put it in confidential remarks? Or what if I kind of hide it in this way? Right. It will not be allowed in any manner. So please don't try and come up with some creative workaround. Just, it's not allowed. It's not allowed. And so what does that leave you? That leaves you with the other two ways, right? So the first way that we talked about is that you get paid through the MLS by virtue of being a member. But the other two ways, using a CBC or using the SPBB, that's how you're going to get paid.
Right. So if I'm a buyer's agent and you have a listing, I'm going to do what I always do when I'm writing an offer, because I always want my offers accepted. I'm going to call you, the listing agent.
That's the point.
Thank you. And I'm going to say, hey, Spencer, can you tell me what are the things that are important to the seller in the offer they receive? And by the way, is the seller willing to give a credit to my buyer to pay me, or are you offering some form of cooperating compensation?
I totally agree. I think that's the absolute way. First of all, you always should be contacting the seller, right? If you're writing up an offer. Even if it's just, you don't have any questions, but just to let them know, hey, I showed my buyer 123 Main Street today. They loved it. We're going to be sending over an offer, right? But now you're going to include, by the way, listing broker, are you offering any cooperating buyer compensation?
Right.
Yes. Oh, you are? Great. I'm going to send over my CBC form, my cooperating broker compensation agreement, to solidify that in writing.
Right.
And by the way, what's the trick? We don't want to send it over at the same time we send over the offer, right?
Yes.
Because they could potentially, the seller could sign the offer without the agent, the listing agent signing the CBC.
Good
and now
point.
You're stuck.
Great point.
So you send it over first saying, they've already agreed. They've already told you that they are going to pay this.
Right.
So you just are putting it in writing, and then you send over the offer.
Right.
They say no, then what would we do?
If they say no, then you would use the paragraph 3G3 on the RPA and attach as SPBB for the seller to consider it.
Yeah.
And write a good, strong offer.
Right.
Because the days of writing a really poor offer, sloppy offer, and asking the seller to credit the buyer to pay their agent, I don't see that working.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you're talking to that listing agent, it's listen, are you offering cooperating broker compensation? If yes, we're going to go down the CBC route.
Right.
If they say no, wonderful. We will be submitting an offer. And in the terms of that offer, just as all other terms are negotiable, we're going to be including that SPBB. We're going to be asking the seller to pay our buyer broker commission. The buyer technically is going to be asking the seller to pay it, along with whatever else they're going to be asking for, right? And it's all negotiable, and it'll all be worked out in the end, and it'll all be agreed to in some form. As long as everybody is happy, there's no reason why it can't work out. So it's one of these two ways.
So in real estate lingo, we have the SPBB or the MLS or the CBC. And as things go along, we'll go down to the CBC or the SPBB in real estate lingo. Is that right?
That's right.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
It's easy.
It is not as complicated, I think, as people are afraid that it is or will be, and recognize that it's a change. And we do understand that, agents are scared of using the buyer representation and broker compensation form, the BRBC, and how are they going to get it signed? Yes. I know you have some thoughts on that.
So everybody does it differently, but I like to go the easy way. And I start with the agency disclosure because it says right at the top, it's required by the California Civil Code. And I just cover what my fiduciary duties are, because the first thing I want a buyer to know is I want them to know that I'm here for them and I owe them a duty, so that that's on the table first and foremost. And the California Civil Code requires me to get this signed. So this isn't me trying to snake a document in to get signed. California requires it. And then from there, I go into my buyer representation presentation. What are my services? You're an attorney. So I've had a lot of meetings with attorneys, and they always show me what their services are. And then they ask me to sign their fee agreement. Why are we any different? We are professionals. We're supposed to be professionals, and it seems logical. And it doesn't seem to surprise people because CPAs do it too, right? Even a dentist.
All professionals.
Right.
And one of the things that I'd like to remind people is nobody has a problem or second guesses or questions the idea that a listing agent goes in and gets a listing agreement signed, right? What is actually happening there? They are going into somebody's living room that they have never met before.
Right.
Maybe they've talked to them once, maybe.
Right.
But let's just, for the most part, they're a stranger. And they're giving them a presentation and asking them to sign a contract, not just a contract, an exclusive contract, a long-term contract that they will be paid for the services. Nobody questions that whatsoever. It's the exact same thing that we're talking about just on the buyer side. And what I think buyer's agents in particular, need to really change their mindset about is that the services that they provide as a buyer's agent and the services that they are presenting to a potential buyer when they're asking them to sign a buyer representation agreement are not limited to just showing property. And I think that is really the crux of what people and buyer's agents are concerned about, because they're used to just being there to show property. That's the first thing that somebody hires them to do, is to show property. And then hopefully they'll be lucky enough to be the agent standing next to that buyer when the buyer finds the house that they want to write an offer on, and they get to write the offer.
Right.
That needs to change.
Yes.
That mindset needs to change. When the buyer is hiring buyer's agent now, it is not just to show property and open doors. That's just one small part of what we do as an agent. And we need to get the buyers and the agents to understand the commitment is to take you through the entire process to close of escrow. Yes, I'm going to show you properties, of course, but then we're going to find the property you want. We're going to write up the offer. We're going to negotiate that offer. We're going to enter into counter and further negotiation. Part of that is going to include the commission structure. Then we're going to be doing inspections and, getting reports and disclosures. And then there's the renegotiation, right? And the request for repairs and all the other craziness that we all know comes along. Somebody, the loan is not going well, whatever the case may be. And there's a lot of work that has to be done. And that's what has to be understood or made for the buyer to understand, and what us as buyer agents really need to accept that's what we're selling. We are not just trying to get somebody to let us show them a house so that we can be the lucky one.
A great example is I know somebody who has an escrow right now, and they're in escrow and they find out there's a deed of trust, 33-year-old deed of trust on the property. And it's like, well, the beneficiary, that trust has been terminated. There's no promissory note. So it's a quagmire, right? Because a beneficiary has to agree to a reconveyance deed. And guess what? Beneficiary does not want to. They want to be paid.
Right.
So who ends up negotiating that? The real estate agent.
Yeah.
Didn't see that one coming.
Yeah. There are a lot of pitfalls, as we know. For any of you who have been doing this, things happen. And so again, just getting back to that BRBC, you mentioned you like to start with the AG. Of course, that's where you have to start.
You have to start.
Everybody should know that is literally the first document that is required by law that you must have signed. I'll just go a little bit further. There's buyer presentations, and everybody should be doing a buyer presentation. I think our next podcast of Just the Facts will be going through a buyer presentation.
We'll have
so for next week, be ready for that. But I also like to promote the idea of being an expert on the documents themselves.
Absolutely.
And so when you say, how am I going to get somebody to sign this document? Why don't you start by becoming an expert in the document yourself? Come to a class. We both teach classes. The association is now offering ABR classes for free. Go to a class, learn about the BRBC.
Right.
Like learn what the obligations are of the client, what the pitfalls are for the client. Be able to explain it, show them where their liabilities might be if they've signed another contract and where they need to put that information in to carve it out. Show where it says they are providing you as the agent with authorization to negotiate their commission and this agreement within the RPR. Show them how any money that you receive from the listing broker, from a CBC or any other third party would be credited to whatever they owe. You want to show them all these things. You show them the expertise that you have, and that is showing them and proving to them your value.
Right.
And how can they say no at the end when they have just seen, now they're going to do this on every form.
Right. I've never, since 1996, ever had to do a song and dance to get mine signed. I walk them through the forms. I explain all the pitfalls. For example, I only do exclusive. And one of the biggest reasons is to protect my clients, because if it's non-exclusive, they work with me, they work with someone else, we both show the same property or different properties, who's going to get paid?
Yeah.
I don't want a procuring cause issue. So I'm like, I'm protecting you. And by the way, I'm a professional. I'm protecting my time. People tend to respect that.
Yeah. So I think just in summary for today, I think the key takeaways are remembering that there's really two options and distinguishing between the use of the CBC form and the SPBB form within the RPR on how an agent can negotiate their commissions and getting paid. And then, making sure that you're using the documents right and using your knowledge of the documents to show your value to your clients.
Right.
So we'll see you next time for buyer representation presentation.
And then they're just the facts.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.